Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's Contract Administration Practice Group. With that, I want to hand it over to Douglas and Jim to get started with today's session on integrated project delivery and CA services. So, Douglas and Jim, over to you.
Welcome, everyone. This is Douglas Freeman, and Jim is also on the call. Hope everyone had a great last month as we start this month's Construction Administration Contract Practice Group meeting. Jim, any salutations you want to offer?
Yeah, just welcome to everybody. I look forward to this. I've been excited since we started talking about discussing integrated project delivery. So let's get started.
Okay. So let's start with the definition of integrated project delivery, and this comes from the AIA California Council. They've done quite a bit of work on integrated project delivery, and their definition is: it is a project delivery approach that integrates people, systems, business structures, and practices into a process that collaboratively harnesses the talents and insights of all participants to optimize project results, increase value to the owner, reduce waste, and maximize efficiency through all phases of the design, fabrication, and construction. IDP principles can be applied to a variety of contractual arrangements, and IDP teams can handle members well beyond the basic triad of owner, architect, and contractor. In all cases, integrated projects are uniquely distinguished by highly effective collaboration among the owner, the prime designer, and the prime contractor, commencing at an early design and continuing through the project handover. So the theory is that you get all the parties involved early in an effort to reduce waste and have a more efficient process. There's information out there, a study that was done some time ago, where it shows that the construction industry has, over the past 10 years or so, been shown to be less efficient, while most other industries are being more efficient. And so there's a lot more waste in the construction industry than any other industry. And so IDP was an effort to try to help turn that around. So collaboration is key for an integrated project delivery method. You want to get contribution from parties early, get their expertise involved so that you deal with issues and make decisions earlier in the process, so you're not repeating and recorrecting and revisiting items as they come up in the traditional method. The idea is that the responsibility for making decisions or being responsible for an issue is put on the person that's most able to handle it. The decisions are made on a what is best for the project basis. So the project is placed first, is over the interests of the individuals or the team. And essential principles are involved is that there must be mutual respect, mutual benefit for all parties, trust. It should be a transparent process, enhanced and open communication, open information sharing. Goals are defined early and clearly, and everybody is working towards those same goals. Team success is tied to the project success. There's shared risk and rewards and value-based decision making. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll add here, one of the things that I learned early in this process from my mentor is a statement that he used to love to make. We did whatever it took on a job to make that go successfully, and many times to the detriment of the financial results to the firm. And I think that's a piece of the integrated system, is in what you said here about what's being best for the project. It may hurt us, it may hurt the bottom line a bit, but in the end, it has a positive impact overall. And I think that best for the project basis is really, to me, a big piece of the magic of what integrated delivery does.
As the shared risk and rewards is a different concept too. You have seen that with CM at risk projects where the CM will share in the contingency, and if there's contingency left over, the CM and the owner have some kind of a sharing agreement. With integrated project delivery, it also can extend to the design professional as well, where when the project is successful and there are specific goals defined along the way and those goals are met, then the financial reward is shared amongst all parties and not just the owner or the owner and the CM. And the use of BIM is recommended to achieve the collaboration that's required for an integrated project delivery project. So BIM is not the same thing as integrated project delivery. They're two separate concepts. BIM is a tool, while integrated project delivery is a process. So let's talk about what BIM is, and I think we all are familiar with BIM. The National Building Information Model Standard Project Committee has this definition: that building information modeling is a digital representation of the physical and functional characteristics of a facility. A BIM is a shared knowledge resource of information about a facility, forming a reliable basis for decisions during the life cycle, defined as existing from earliest concept to demolition. So there are different software packages out there. I think Revit is probably the one that's most used, but there are other software packages that are used to create the BIM models. And typically there's not just one BIM model. In most cases, at least in my experience, you'll have the architectural design team will have their BIM model, the electrical engineer will have his BIM model, the mechanical engineer will have her BIM model, the structural engineer will have the BIM model, and I've also seen some cases where the contractor has his own BIM model, where he will either do it all himself or sometimes take the architect's model and then use it to create his own BIM model. So there's typically not just one BIM model, there's multiple, and then as they merge together, it becomes a federated model that composes or combines the aspects of all of the different trades models together to create the BIM model. This graphic here I thought was quite informative. This is from the again AIA California Council, and it is a graphic illustration that compares the traditional design process with the integrated design process. So at the top half of the screen there's the traditional design process, and at the bottom half you've got the integrated design process. So traditionally we had the phases: pre-design or programming, schematic design, design development, construction documents, bidding, construction, and closeout. Now, BIM process, they changed those terminologies to conceptualization, criteria design, detail design, implementation documents, agency coordination, final buyout, construction, and closeout. So as you can see, in the traditional method, the what is it that we're building? You start in pre-design and kind of rolls all the way through the design process into the construction phase. As oftentimes during the construction phase in the traditional process, we are still issuing ASIs and addendums and making corrections and responding to RFIs, and so there's still a bit of design that goes on during the construction phase. The how to build it starts in the traditional phase and into design development and runs through construction documents, and again carries over some into construction, because again you're issuing those change documents or clarification documents. And then the who picks up during the bidding process, and that's who's going to actually build it, the contractor there, and then realizing it is construction through the end. But in the integrated project delivery process, you see that the what stops at the end of this detailed design, which traditionally would be the design development phase. So what you're going to do, what you're designing in integrated project delivery is intended to not carry over into the implementation and construction. You should be done making those design decisions when you go into the implementation phase. The how, you see that moves way back, and when you have the contractors, at least the major, or at least your general contractors, construction manager, when you have them involved early, you're getting input from them on constructability issues and those kind of things a lot earlier on in the process. Again, you've got the who, the contractor involved early, and a lot of times that can be not just the general contractor, but major subcontractors, 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 material suppliers, manufacturers. So all those folks start getting their input in a lot earlier, and then realizing it, actually building it again, is the construction phase through closeout. But I thought that this was, and I borrowed this from the AIA California Council's. They've got a document out there called Integrated Project Delivery Working Definition. And I thought this was a nice graphic to show who gets involved when and what goes on when you compare the two processes together. So Matthew, at this point, I'm gonna pause and see if there are any comments from the audience. And Jim, you were going to say?
No, that's what I was going to ask.
All right, we have one question here. I'm just pulling it up on my screen. So a question here from Kevin. One of the risk allocations that usually cannot be shared unless the project is done via extreme IDP, where the owner, contractor, and AE form an LLC, is professional liability. Can you comment on the pitfalls of sharing BIM and allowing parties to modify or edit the BIM in which the AE can manage their professional liability?
Kevin, that's an excellent point. Later on in the presentation, when I talk about some of the legal concerns with doing an integrated project delivery process, I don't know that there's a lot of answers for a lot of the questions that are out there, because this is a new process, and as far as I know, and I went back and did some further research to prepare for this, there have not been any court cases that have come down with any rulings on integrated project delivery processes and liability and responsibility, and so it's kind of new territory. Now, there was one case that was settled, and I think that was about 2 years ago, maybe. It was about 2 years ago, and there was a lot of buzz about it, but because the case was settled and it didn't go through the court system, it's not precedent, and the settlement was confidential, so we don't really know a whole lot about what was going on in that case. But briefly, that case involved a contractor that was suing the design professional, and I'm not quite sure if he was suing the owner as well. It probably was. And the issue was that it was a BIM project, and the BIM model was shared with the contractor. And in the BIM model, the plenum space was extremely tight, and there was a sequence where the work had to be put in a certain sequence for it to work. Now, the BIM model had everything up there working correctly, but when the contractor built it, he didn't put it in the sequence that it needed to go in for it all to fit. And I believe his claim was that the model was defective, or the design was defective, and I guess the issue really was communication. The design team did not communicate to the contractor the sequence that the stuff needed to be installed in. And like I said, that case ended up being settled, and I don't know what the payouts, we don't know because it was confidential what the payouts were for that case. And it's not precedent. There was a lot of buzz about the risk of using BIM and legal issues with the design professional. But traditionally, sequencing of work has been the contractor's responsibility, not the design professionals. And so that case, I think, was a bit interesting, and I would have been curious to see how it would have came out in court, because the sequencing, again, traditionally is the contractor's responsibility. Here, the design professional knew what the sequencing should be, but did not tell the contractor what that was. So, again, they settled, so I don't know how that would have turned out. So there are issues. We'll talk about some of the issues later. I don't know that I'm going to have a lot of answers.
I would be interested in everyone that's participating today if they may be willing to share some information about a project that they have done with an integrated system and a BIM model, and maybe perhaps those that have done an integrated system without as a project delivery method, and just see perhaps any comments you have to share about your experience of what you've seen happen so far. As Doug said, I think we haven't yet had the unfortunate opportunity of much litigation centered around this method, or at least here in this country. So any experiences that you've had, not with litigation, but I'm saying just as a delivery method, if you'll raise your hand, let Matthew know, maybe he can turn your mic on and let you share.
While we're waiting for that, I also, if folks would like to, I would just like to know how many people on the call have actually done a integrated project delivery process. So if you want to care to share by just sending a chat response to Matthew indicating whether you have been involved in the integrated project delivery process. And while folks are doing that, I just want to touch on a couple of things again from the AIA California Council's document, Integrated Project Delivery Working Definition. Some things that they talk about here for a couple of these different phases. First, the concept is to shift forward decision making and getting, again, involved earlier on contractors, installers, fabricators, and suppliers. The detailed design phase, what they say is that at the end of the detailed design phase, the intent is to have all key design decisions finalized. Integrated those decisions into the documents, and so that at the end of the construction document phase, or the implementation document phase, you're putting your pencil down and you're not drawing anymore, you're not making any changes. So the idea is that questions are resolved, are advised, are caught and developed and responded to during the implementation document phase. So the goal is that the documents how to implement it will not change at the end of the implement document phase. Whereas in the traditional method, we issue quite a bit of changes during the construction phase. The intent here is that that does not happen. The only changes that should occur would be owner changes or unforeseen conditions. So the thought is you move all of that issues catching, conflicts resolutions, you move all of that up earlier before construction starts. It's less wasteful. You're not tearing stuff out. The BIM model is the method for finding those issues, class detections, and it's a leaner, cleaner way to do construction. That's the theory behind it. Shop drawings also are done earlier and included in the implementation document. So that's another key concept here, which may raise some issues that we'll talk about in a bit. But the thought is that the shop drawing process is merged into the design as the contractors, subcontractors, and suppliers document how systems and structures will be created, and put that in the BIM model in the implementation documents. So following the implementation documents, and you have the buyout phase, and I find that interesting because in my experience, the information that you get from suppliers and subcontractors during design oftentimes differs from what you get from them when you actually ask them to put a price on it. If they don't know that they're going to get the job, a lot of times they'll tell you what you want to hear instead of giving you the real answer. So we see that a lot with CM at risk, where we go to suppliers, manufacturers, subcontractors, and try to get information from them, and contractors relying on it, putting together their GMP, and then they go out to bid, and the numbers are different. I would think that the same thing would happen with the integrated project delivery process, because if they're not under contract to actually provide the services, I don't know that you're going to be able to rely on the information, all of the information that you get from them. So I think that's still an issue with this process, is that it contemplates that the information you're going to get is going to be correct, so you won't have to make changes during construction. And that may be well and true for the people that you have under contract, but if you don't have, say, a mechanical engineer, or not engineer, mechanical subcontractor on board yet, and you're talking to different mechanical suppliers or subcontractors about issues, it's been my experience that if they're not under contract, that the information is oftentimes kind of iffy. So you may end up having to make changes after the completion of the implementation document phase. The way around that would be, and I don't know if you can do it on public work, would be to get those guys under contract a lot earlier, just like you're getting the GC under contract, and having his input back earlier to do that with the major subs. So Matthew, what have we gotten back from the group on stories that they may want to share, or how many of them have actually done an integrated project delivery process?
Well, we haven't gotten anything back from anyone except for Kevin here, said that most of his work is for public owners, and IPD is not enabled by legislation in many jurisdictions, so no real experience for him.
And that is the case here as well, is that IPD is not a process that we can do in the state of North Carolina. So that is another issue. It's new, and it's going to take a while for it to grow legs, but I do think that it's coming. So we'll keep going. The construction phase, or construction administration phase, is typically called, is the phase where the benefits of the process are to be realized. And again, this is from AIA California Council's Integrated Project Delivery Working Definition paper. So for architects under traditional delivery methods, the contract administration phase is considered the final stage of design. It's the last chance to make changes, address issues. And again, in the IPD process, all that should be done during the implementation phase through the virtual building of the building with the BIM model. Therefore, the CA phase should primarily be just a quality control and construction monitoring function, and not a function where you're responding to RFIs and issuing ASIs and addendums could pick up stuff that wasn't caught in the documents. So because the greater efforts put forth in the design phases, construction on the IDP is deemed to be a more efficient method. I want to pause here too and see if there's any comments on that concept from the group.
You know, I would just add, Doug, while we're waiting, the shift of that design, both criteria and detailed, as well as the preparation of the implementation documents as it carries over into this phase. You know, I think the circumstances that we usually hear when we have delays or extras or problems on a job could have been, for the most part, they could have been overcome. They may, in the sense of products or details. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. When you get on the job, nobody is a fortune teller. You don't know exactly where perhaps things are going to intersect, but you certainly know the kind of products that speak to each other properly and work well together. And I think that it certainly could make the construction administration phase less onerous, and as it's described here, more about quality control than about decision making. Through that, moving earlier in the timeline of the people that are really installing the work.
And Jim, again, I agree with what you're saying. I think the problem with the process, again, is that it still has bidding after the implementation documents are done. So if you don't know who's going to do it before you come up with what is going to be done or how it's going to be done, then you don't get that feedback from who's going to do it as to how they want to do it. And so if you are basing your design on manufacturer X or subcontractor X and their number is not low, and so you got to go with manufacturer Y or subcontractor Y, and their way of doing things or their product is slightly different, then you still may have to deal with some issues and some changes after the completion of the implementation documents. And on public projects, I don't know, there's not currently a way to get to the who prior to the bidding. And even in this IDP process, as we saw, the bidding phase comes after the implementation documents are done, so you don't know the who, so you may not be getting the proper input when you're putting together the documents.
Right.
Any comments, Matthew?
Yeah, we have one comment here from Joel. He says, parallel to IPD, in Washington State, the general construction manager approach can be used on public projects. And then he says in parentheses, subject to review by the state board. Projects will be significant amounts of mechanical and electrical work and have a selection process, usually administered by the GC, which brings mechanical, electrical, and construction management into the pre-bid part of CS.
This is new, and statutes and governments are going to have to catch up to it, and for it to work truly the way I think it was meant to work, I think all of the major subcontractors, and depending on the building type, and there may be some subcontractors or some manufacturers that you may need to have on the team earlier so that those implementation documents are complete, correct, and custom to who's actually going to be doing the work.
Was that Washington State?
Yes, Washington State.
Okay. Well, so there'll be one to watch there for the first opportunity for litigation, huh? Or an early one anyway, maybe not first, but early.
Okay, again, this comes from the AIA California Council's document, Integrated Project Delivery, working definition. These are the benefits that they are saying will result from doing an IDP process. If there's less on-site construction administration activity, because the conflicts have been resolved virtually through the bid model. That there are fewer, and if you go back to some of the earlier versions of this document, there was even a claim that there would be no RFIs, but I think they realized that that's kind of a pipe dream, but there's fewer RFIs because contractors, subcontractors, vendors have been involved in developing the design and the intent and the documents for their portions of the design. They've been involved in the development of them. So the model is used to augment or manage and enhance the RFI process so that the process of resolving them would be quicker, easier. You don't have to run out to the field and take photographs. How does this work? You got it right there in the model. So that's another benefit. There would be less office construction administration efforts because submittals have already been integrated into the model. So if you know you're using manufacturer X's equipment and manufacturer X is on board and you get him to put his stuff in the model, so you don't need to go through that submittal process. If there's a better understanding of the design intent, because consistent information and documentation will be available to all participants, so that the guys putting the stuff together have a better understanding of what the design intent was, because they were involved in the design process. More benefits is that more prefabrication can be done because the design was developed earlier in collaboration with the fabricator. Now that would be a huge benefit, not only in CA time, but in the construction time. If we can get a bunch of stuff prefabricated, pre-made, and it's just brought out to the site and plugged into the system there. There's less waste because more material is factory generated. You're not cutting and wasting stuff out on the job site. It's less injuries because of the prefabrication. The work is being performed in a controlled environment and not out on the job site. At the end of the job, you have a model that is based on as-built conditions because the model is updated and maintained during the construction project. You have a schedule tied to the model to allow visualization of deviations from plan sequences and durations, and warranty and O&M information is added to the model. Now, I actually talked with one contractor here locally that claims that they do their own bid model and they use it to determine sequencing, phasing, scheduling, purchasing that stuff needs to be purchased so that they don't have stuff sitting around it. It gets to the site when they need it. How they're going to use the site, layout areas, phasing, and they say they virtually build the building exactly like it's going to be built on a job site virtually in their BIM model. So it helps them timing-wise, scheduling-wise, you know, when this needs to be on site, who needs to go first, and that's the concept behind it. So I don't think that, I think it's the wave of the future. I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get us there still. There's many subcontractors that don't use CAD, let alone Revit for BIM information. And so we've got to get the subs and the suppliers up to speed on that. We've got to get the AHJs, the governments up to speed on it. We've also got to get the legal profession up on it and the insurance industry as well, and we'll talk about some of that here shortly.
You know, Doug, one of the things that I've seen, just to follow up on the component of an as-built condition in combination with maintenance information, the ability of this integrated system, beginning with the constructors early, carrying through to the as-built documentation, can provide a real tool, depending on the format it's delivered to the owner, as a facilities operation tool, where great detail is embedded in the digital information for component types, contact information, operation specifications, expectations, life cycle costing. I saw a presentation about a hospital where the presenter started with a bottle of aspirin in a drawer, and he started with the image of the aspirin and backed all the way out to the exterior BIM model of the new hospital. And, you know, that drawer had a number on it that was in a cabinet that had a number that was in the pharmacy. And the hospital's intention was, with slight modification, to use that tool as an inventory control method. So, as you just said about the future, there is just incredible potential for everyone in the design and construction business here, having a model of services to offer that's potentially way beyond what we're doing right now.
Yeah, Jim, and I think the healthcare industry may end up being the leader in pushing for the implementation of this. I know there was a client, a hospital client, that we were doing some work for, where they wanted the BIM model to include pretty much everything, down to the paint on the wall. They wanted the paint on the wall to be modeled, so that they could go to the model and see what color the manufacturer supplying paint on the job. With rubber base, it was, you know, every element. But to do that in the model, because that's not typically what we do when we're in the traditional method, to do that in the model, they need to realize that that takes additional effort, and that the fees are not going to match the fees for traditional architectural services when you're putting that type of detail into the model. So some of the activities during construction administration will remain the same. You still be doing site visits, still have your meetings, inspections, testings, and quality control. All those things will relatively be unchanged. There'll still be change orders, but they should be reduced. Again, the theory is that we're going to only be owner-directed changes on unforeseen conditions. Scheduling, progress reviews, and all those will still be subject to review, but RFIs are supposed to be reduced tremendously. Submittals should be reduced tremendously. And so the effort during construction is reduced, but then the effort during design is increased. So let's move on. And again, some of this is uncharted territory, but we can foresee what some of the issues might be. So some legal considerations for doing integrated project delivery. Let's start with entity formation and contracting. So will there be separate entities, a single entity, joint ventures, separate contracts, or a single contract? Currently, the AIA has several BIM contract documents out there that anticipate these different types of combinations, and then you would use the document based on the formation that you're going to have. And I didn't want to go through and identify all of that, but that's out there. There's the consensus docs that are out there, but you're going to need to decide, are you going to have your general contractor as an entity, your architect as an entity, and your owner as an entity, and have each one have its own contract with the owner. So there's a contract with the owner and the architect, a contract with the owner and the general contractor, or include the major subcontractors, or whether it be a single entity where for this project an LLC is formed and there's one contract with the owner and an LLC, and that LLC includes the contractor and the design professional. Is it a joint venture situation where the contractor and design professional form a joint venture, so they're separate entities, but there's a joint venture and there's a single contract? Is there a single tripartite contract where they're separate entities but they all sign one contract? So there's a lot of different ways you can come together to do this process, and there's a lot of different contractual issues that arise when you're doing that. You need to make sure that you're clear on who's responsible for what and what risks there are and what risks you're undertaking. Who's responsible for coordination and review of the design services. What if you have a situation where the owner signs a contract with the contractor, and then the contractor signs a contract with the design professional, so the design professional is the subcontractor to the contractor. So now the design professional is working for the contractor. The contractor is doing the HVAC piece, design build, so to speak, so that that's not in the architect's scope of work. And he's doing that directly with his sub-mechanical contractor, who has his own engineer. So who's going to be responsible for coordinating all our design services? The relationship of design services to compensation, I mentioned that earlier. The efforts are moving up front so that there's more effort put forth during the design phase, so that the compensation should follow that, and you need to adjust your fee schedule so that the fees match the effort as you're working through the process. So your CA fee may end up going from 30% to 20%, and your design fee may be going from 20% to 30%. So you need to look at those issues when you're putting together these contracts. Dispute resolution. There's several different dispute resolution methods that are available, and I would encourage that if you're going to do this IDP process where everybody is all for one and one for all, that you look at how you're going to resolve disputes. The intent, again, is to do what's best for the project, and in doing that, as Jim was saying, it may put you at risk of your bottom line, but when you're coming to this and you're taking this approach, rarely is the fault, so to speak, all on one person. And traditionally, that's what we've looked at. Oh, it's the contractor's fault. No, it's the design professional's fault. Here, it may be a combination. It may be all three parties' faults. So dispute resolution, I think, should be looked at. Are you going to do the typical, just sue somebody and go to court? I think that's kind of contrary to the concept. Mediation is an option. arbitration's an option. And we talked about in some previous sessions where parties agree that they're going to resolve them internally, where they take maybe it's one person from each of the three entities that are higher up in the organizations and not doing the day-to-day work on the project, and they get together and sit down and just hash it out. So you need to look at dispute resolution. And then the incentive compensation, cost savings, and cost overruns need to be dealt with. Contingency is typically in these projects, IDP processes, shared amongst all the parties. We talked about that a little bit earlier, where if the goals are met, that there's incentive compensation that is shared amongst all the parties. If there's cost savings, it's not just the owners, or it's not just split between the owner and the contractor. There's effort and work that the design professional is doing, so he shares in that cost savings. But what if there's cost overruns? Does that mean that the design professional and the contractor have to give up some of their profit? Well, all those issues need to be looked at and agreed to when you're contracting. And I said there's contracts out there. They address some of these things. You just need to be familiar with them. Make sure you read those contracts over and know exactly what it is that you're getting yourself into. I know on one project, we were talking about this issue of cost savings and shared savings, and it was raised that perhaps it's a conflict of interest for the design professional to share in the cost savings. The thought being was that to increase his fee, perhaps him or her would design so that the numbers were high, and then come back and say, oh, well, we can do this cheaper, and so there's that cost savings. And it was an intentional effort on the part of the designer to falsely create a cost saving situation so that they can profit from it. So all those issues are out there. Licensing is another consideration. If you're forming a single entity or joint venture, you got to make sure that you're complying with all the licensing laws. If it's a single entity and you've got architect and contractor, and your licensing laws say that you need to just check them, because there's different states, different requirements in terms of ownership and how many licensed architects you have to have, or if you've got a LLC and there's three parties to it, so you've got your contractor, your mechanical sub, your electrical sub, your plumbing sub, and your architect, and they all want to form this LLC for this project. The smallest piece of that's going to be the architect, so you will have one licensed architect or licensed architectural firm, and then you've got four other entities that are coming together to form this one entity, and they may not be permitted per your licensing laws. Same thing to consider when you're looking at it from a general contractor standpoint. Do the statutes and laws that govern the practice of general contracting allow the entity that you're formed to actually be a licensed contractor or a licensed design professional? So you've got those issues to deal with. Signing on the documents. How do you sign a BIM model? Even if you are converting it to paper, then there's a question of who signs it. So if you've got shop drawings that are included into it that weren't done under the architect's direct supervision or control, how is he to sign the documents? So you've got those issues you've got to deal with that the statutes just have not caught up to this concept yet. I know I will be hesitant to put my seal on some documents or on a BIM model where there's a lot of information in there that wasn't done under my purview. Before I go on, let's see if there's any comments on this from the group. Matthew?
Yeah, there's one comment here, get your input in on. Because it seems like the risk of the AE is increased in IPD compared with other forms of project delivery, do you have any suggestions on topics for which the AE should be aware before agreeing to enter into an IPD contract? It seems that the AE typically only gets so much benefit from the project while assuming a significant risk. Is there any anecdotal evidence that AEs are seeing greater profit out of IPD projects?
Not that I'm aware of. Again, this is new. I don't know that I have heard of any firms that are saying that they are making more money with an IDP project. And I'm not sure if necessarily the risks are any greater. And I guess that goes back to the contracting part of it. You need to know what it is you're signing up for. I could see possibly where it could be of a financial benefit if you're doing a whole lot less during construction administration, and that seems to be the phase that gets hit the hardest in this profession for architects, when there's the most chance for overrunning your budget. Is that if you're not dealing with a whole bunch of RFIs and submittals and resolving issues that could increase your profit during that phase, decrease your effort and increase your profit. But how much of that is offset by what you're doing in the design phase, I don't know. Jim, any comments on that?
No, nothing that you didn't already say. I think the process is so new that evidence hasn't been collected, and I'm sure that our professional associations will be doing so as soon as they can as the process grows. But no, Doug, I agree with everything you said. I think the opportunities, you were giving out percentages a little earlier about what fees may be, and Doug's talking about percentages of your fee. We're certainly not talking about fees that you would propose, because we don't do that in these kind of webinars, but the assignment of percentages, as Doug was talking about, might shift between phases, and there may be that opportunity to end up with more profit at the end of the job because you have been able to save in some of those categories that usually seem to overrun our budgets. But I think he also said what is different here is a service level that goes beyond what the typical firm does, or what a typical service might be, or traditional, I guess I should say, not typical, but traditional. So I think the opportunity is there for us to sit down as a practitioner before we start this work with an owner and say, okay, this is something that's brand new, and here's the way we need to look at this, especially those that are trying this method with owners that they've worked with before.
Jim, I agree. I think there may be opportunities here for asking for an increased fee. If you're going to be the one that's going to be managing this BIM model and controlling it and who has access to it, and making sure that somebody's not in there messing with it, it shouldn't be, and doing all that management piece of it, that's something that's not traditionally done. And that's an effort that should be compensated for. So there's opportunities for us as design professionals to be compensated for the additional efforts and the additional risk that we're taking on by doing a project like this. But I think it comes down to education and talking to your client and letting them, getting them, teaching them to understand what it is that you're taking on. And it could be that you're not going to be the one that's going to be managing the BIM model. It could be that it's going to be the contractor. So let's keep going. Insurance, I mentioned earlier, I think that the insurance industry is going to have to come up with some new products to align with what we're talking about here. Bonding issues. If it's a single entity, then you're going to have to deal with that. And if you are a design professional and you're in there, what does that mean for you as well? So I think there's insurance issues that need to be looked at. Again, it's new, and the insurance industry typically reacts once it's been out there on the market for a while. There may be project-specific policies that you can get, or different BIM or IDP policies that may be developed to deal with the allocation of risk. You need to look at your professional liability insurance and talk with your insurance carriers to make sure that what you're taking on is going to be covered under your current policies. If you take on a BIM project, I know Schenner has addressed some of this stuff, and I'm sure some other ones have, but it might be a good idea for you to, if you're going to do an integrated project delivery project, to just touch base with your carrier before getting involved in it. I mean, BIM has its own set of considerations that we need to look at when doing a project like this. If you're going to use BIM, and again, you don't have to use BIM to do an integrated project delivery project, but it is recommended. So you got the digital data protocols that you have to deal with. Who is going to be the one that's going to be responsible for the model, for the federated model? What software is going to be used? Which team members will have the ability to create and modify elements within the model? How do you control the model such that access is limited to those that are dealing with a specific element? You don't want your skilled fabricator who's doing these sharp drawings to go in and start moving walls around. So how do you deal with all of that? Coordination. Who's going to be responsible for coordination? Is it going to be mechanical subcontractor? Is it going to be the architect? There's issues about reliance on the model. Who can rely on it for what and when? AIA has a document in their contract documents that allows you to go through and indicate what's going to be in the model at the different phases along the process and what it can be relied on. And that's something that you'll need to look at and go through and incorporate, I would suggest, into your contract, so that when you're at the early phase of the process, that you don't have somebody going in and doing a takeoff and guaranteeing a price on something that they shouldn't be looking at. Copyright is a big issue. Traditionally, the documents are done by the design professionals, and unless they contract it away to the owner, the design professional is the owner of the copyright in the document. The design professional is the one that's creating it, so the law gives them that ownership. Here with the BIM model, you've got multiple people that are authors of the document. So traditionally, under the law, everyone that contributes has ownership for what they contributed to it. So you'll have multiple owners of this BIM model. So how do you deal with that? Who is going to be the ultimate owner of the BIM model? Is it shared where everyone owns it? What do you do about families and items that you create, that you use for other projects that are in the BIM model? Do you give up ownership of that work because you're using it on this other project? So there's a whole host of issues with BIM and copyright that need to be addressed, and I would suggest that you address them in your contract so that you don't have issues over that. The Sparent Doctrine is a long held doctrine that the courts came up with. I think it was in, I don't remember the year, but it's been around for a long time. And the Spearman doctrine basically says that the contractor is not responsible for defects in the plans and specifications, and the owner warrants that the plans and specifications are sufficient for the contractor to build off of. So the Spearman doctrine, how does that apply when you're doing an IPD project and the contractor and their subs are contributing to the design? So they're involved early on. So they can be in a BIM project responsible for defects in the plans and specs because they are contributing to the design. They're providing input early. That's another issue that's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Spearman doctrine in the courts when issues come up. And I'm sure at some point the courts are going to have to address that. The contractor, if there's going to be an issue, a design issue with the plans and the specs, the contractor's going to go to court, claim Spearman doctrine. Design professionals will say, well, wait a minute, you can't claim the Spearman doctrine because you actually provided input to that. You said we could do that. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. This last slide here, some links to some information that I thought you might find useful. A couple of AIA links. The bottom one is the IPD guide. The top one is that working definition where a lot of this information came from. It's the AIA California Council's document, and the two in the middle are some documents that deal with some of the legal issues with BIM. So that is the last slide I got. I don't know if there's any other questions. Anything from anybody? Anything, Matthew? Anything you want to add, Jim?
We don't have any questions at this point. Oh, Jim?
Sorry, Matthew. Go ahead. I was just going to say, I think it'd be great if the participants in the call might think about any questions or issues that this discussion has prompted them to think about, to send those in, and maybe we could use those as subjects to delve into. As much new trail as we can blaze here with integrated project delivery would be helpful to the whole industry.
Matthew, I think I heard you said you didn't have any other questions. So I'd like to thank everyone for participating and remind everyone that our next meeting will be next month, April 22nd. And we're going to go back into the CSI Contract Administration Practice Guide and talk about Chapter 2, Roles and Responsibilities. And as Jim said, if you would like to, we would certainly like to hear any questions, whether they be from this presentation or any other topics that you might want to discuss at any future meetings. Just send them to Jim or myself. Our emails are there, or you can also send them to Matthew. So Matthew, you want to wrap us up?
Alrighty. Well, thank you very much, Douglas and Jim. Again, as Douglas said, we look forward to seeing you in April. And if you feel free, if you have any questions or comments you'd like to add, drop them to the emails you see on the screen, or my email, which is this mfochs@csinet.org, and we'll try to get back to you with any questions or comments we have for you in return. With that, feel free to disconnect and go about your day, and hope to see you again in April. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Take care, everybody.